Young love. And then Luang Por fell in love with Put's stepsister Jai. He started spending more and more of his time in Put's house, courting her. The custom of the day decreed that young couples should not be alone together, and touching of any kind was taboo. The young man was to meet with his girl at her family home, upstairs on the porch in the evening, where she would be sitting demurely. Jai's parents seemed content enough with the prospective match. Luang Por was a friend of the family, good-natured, hard-working and honest, and, perhaps more importantly, his family were wealthy enough to offer a good bride price. One evening, the young couple hatched a plan. They would marry as soon as Luang Por had completed his national service and spent a rains retreat as a monk to make merit for his parents in the time-honored way. At the time, Luang Por was 18 years old and Jai 17. It would be another 4 years before they could even expect to hold hands. As the rainy season approached, every household was busy preparing ploughs, rakes, hoes, yokes, fish traps and machetes for the upcoming work in the paddy fields. Luang Por had just taken out a load of tools to the family's small hut, raised on stilts in the middle of their fields. You may imagine the scene. An overcast, oppressively humid sky, and underneath it a stocky young man with an unusually wide mouth, bare-chested, his khomar cloth around his loins, bumping up and down on the uncomfortable wooden seat of an ox cart as it jolts along a rutted lane between the vibrant green of the rice fields. He is about to receive devastating news. Luang Por related the story himself many years later. When I was 18, I liked a girl. She liked me too, and as these things go, I eventually fell in love. I wanted to marry her. I daydreamed about having her by my side, helping me out in the fields, making a living together. Then, one day on my way home from work, I met my best friend Put on the road. He said, "Cha, I'm taking the lady." When I heard those words, I went completely numb. I was in a state of shock for hours afterwards. I remembered the prediction of an astrologer that I would have no wife but many children. At that time, I wondered how it could be possible. Simply, and with the unquestioned prerogative that parents of his age and culture possessed, Put's father and stepmother had decided that the 2 stepchildren should marry. There was no more to be said. The reasons were pragmatic, financial. If Put married Jai, the family would be saved a bride price they could ill afford. They had just acquired land some distance from the village that should not be left fallow. The young couple could move out there and farm it together. Luang Por, desolate, had no choice but to reconcile himself to the situation. It made no sense to be angry with Put. His friend had not plotted behind his back and was painfully embarrassed by the whole affair. But this disappointment was a profound one, a sharp and hurtful lesson in the uncertainties that bedevil human affairs. Luang Por did not give up on his friendship with Put, and in fact, it was to last for the rest of his life. But with Jai, he had to be more circumspect. He could not force his feelings for her to disappear by an act of will. As a young monk, if he saw Jai in the monastery, he would do his utmost to avoid an encounter that might stir up difficult emotions. Luang Por admitted that for the first 7 years of his monkhood, he found it impossible to completely let go of his thoughts for this young woman. At this early stage of his monastic life, Luang Por, like a great many young monks through the ages, must have been assailed by fantasies featuring tantalizing scenarios and miraculous happy endings that, when coolly considered, he did not truly desire. It was only when he finally left his familiar surroundings and, through meditation practice, gained a method of stilling his thoughts and seeing them in perspective that the fantasies faded. In later years, as abbot of Wat Pah Pong, describing to the monks the drawbacks of sensual desire, he would often talk of the debt of gratitude he owed to Put. If he hadn't married Mea Chai, then I probably wouldn't be here today. Perhaps this is so, but at the same time, it seems safe to assume that if he had not met this particular obstacle to a conventional married life, another would surely have emerged. In a recorded talk decades later, Luang Por revealed, "I was fed up. I didn't want to live with my parents. The more I thought about it, the more fed up I became. I just wanted to go off by myself the whole time, although where to, I had no idea. I felt like that for a number of years. I was fed up, but not with anything in particular. I just wanted to go somewhere and be alone. These were the feelings I had before I became a monk. I wasn't always fully conscious of them, but they were there all the same, all of the time." Luang Por only ever mentioned 2 other incidents occurring in his relations with the opposite sex. In the first, an ex-monk with whom Luang Por had been friendly during his years as a novice died at an early age, and Luang Por assisted the bereaved family throughout the days of the funeral proceedings. On the night of the cremation, after the last guests had returned to their homes, Luang Por, as a close family friend, felt concerned that the widow and her children would feel lonely and desolate if left alone. He offered to stay on for a couple of nights to keep them company in their grief. On the second night, Luang Por became aware that the lady of the house had come out of the bedroom and had laid down beside him. She took his hand and started to guide it over her body. Luang Por pretended to be asleep. Finding no response, the lady got up and slipped quietly back into her room. In later years, Luang Por was to admit that sexual desire was the one defilement which he had great difficulty in overcoming. But here, in a situation that bore all the elements of an adolescent fantasy, and unbound by vows of celibacy, he was remarkably restrained. The reason may have been fear or lack of physical attraction. In view of his later struggles, however, it is more likely that Luang Por's sense of propriety and his respect for a dead friend overcame desire. It was not unusual for young Thai men of Luang Por's generation to end an evening out with a visit to a brothel. It was quite natural then that his second and final close encounter with a woman occurred in one such establishment, in the back streets of the local town of Warin. The incident occurred shortly before he became a monk, when Luang Por's old friends managed to persuade him that before renouncing the pleasures of the flesh, he should at least first sample their delights. In the end, it was not to be. Once alone in a room, with the young woman he had chosen to help him lose his virginity, Luang Por could not help but notice through the thick powder on her face the ravages of acne. An uncontrollable disgust arose within him. He got up abruptly, and the next thing he knew, he was standing at a street-side food stall with a bowl of noodles in his hand. If it was a debacle, then it was one which most aptly and rather comically foreshadowed the struggles of the next few years. As a young village monk, the only desire that could match Luang Por's sexual lust was a craving for Chinese noodles, a craving so strong that it led him to sneak out of the Wat to his favorite vendor on more than one occasion.